I was like, I wasn't getting love over here anymore.
Right.
I need to get it from the source of what I just found. And it was literally a fountain that never ran dry, and it would fulfill me night after night after night. So what was so dark and destructive had actually was healed and made whole through Jesus. And it wasn't like this worship night or anything like that.
Right.
It was just
No,
literally being
in your
with the
home.
Lord in my bedroom. And so I would say that if you are struggling with that, if this is something that you're looking for, get alone with the Lord, because he's the only one that can truly satisfy your heart. He's the only one that can heal those places and satisfy the love that you're desiring. And that forever changed me when I said no more to that, because it was destructive, and I said yes to Jesus in that way.
Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Girls Podcast. We are so excited to have you. I am joined by Kacey Stokes, or shall I say Pastor Kacey Stokes, one of my favorite people in the world, one of my best friends, and I cannot wait for you to hear her story. Many of you know her from Shoreline City, but it's really wild because I think in life, you think you know someone and you think the way that you see their life, the way that it is today, that their life has always been that way. But I have on my heart, as I was praying for this conversation, I was thinking about all of you who have friends either that don't know the Lord, or you're a Christian, but right now you're just settling in your life. Like you're settling and not allowing yourself to have the inheritance that God has for you. And I want you to just like get to know Kacey Stokes, because if you're to look on her Instagram now, or you see her at church on a Sunday, she's a boss. She leads and is just one of the key people that help us tell this epic God story at Shoreline City. She's a beautiful family. She has 2 beautiful kids, an amazing husband, and they helped us plant this church. So, but if you were to look at her feed, it's like beautiful. Her family's beautiful. Her life is beautiful. But I need you to know that behind all the beauty, there's a woman who's walked through some things, who's made some amazing decisions to fall in love with Jesus. But what you see today, because she's stunning, look at her, just take her in. There was a fight on the other side of the beauty that you see. And what I feel in my heart for this particular conversation is that you have friends that are either compromising or settling for not God's best, or you who are even hanging out with us today are in a season of settling. And we're praying by the end of this conversation that you would choose God's best instead of settling. So that was my little introduction.
So good. Well, thank you
you
so much for having me. What an honor and a joy building
yes.
this church with you and following you. I just feel like Ruth and Naomi, like I will follow you wherever we go. Just honored to be here. And so thank you so much. Love you.
It's an honor
so
to have
dearly.
you. And I'm so thankful you and your husband said yes. You said yes to this church. When there's no building, there was nothing. Yes. There was literally just words on a piece of paper. Earl and I wrote out the church that we saw. So there's just words on paper, but there's no building. There was no team. There's no promise of anything except for will you follow us as we follow Jesus. And thank you for literally, you guys rearranged your whole life. You sold everything, downsized to help us over 13 years ago build what is today Shoreline City.
Yes. Well, we were following you guys because you did the exact same thing. I think you were going in blind faith, and we were just like, these are leaders that we will follow, and just felt so called. And so it's changed our life for the better. This church has made our life better. You have made our lives personally better. And so it's just the best thing, I think, in life that we've ever really done as a married couple. And so I still pinch myself like, God, I can't believe you chose us where we were to come and be a part of this, because even like with our kids, we're like, could you imagine our lives being any different? No, because this is so good. So thank you so much.
I'm so glad y'all said yes. What's it like before we dive into your story? We're 13 years in, but you were there like day 0, before there was even a day 1. What's it like to watch now what you see God doing in all the locations and the people's lives and even your family? What's it like after 13 years? You've been in the front seat of the car. You've seen it all. What's this journey been like for you from when you signed up to say yes to 13 years later?
Wow. Well, I just remember driving up here thinking no one is going to know about Shoreline City because you have all these incredible churches in Dallas. How is anyone going to know? And I just remembered, let me just keep being faithful every single day. But looking at it now, I am blown away. Like, seriously, could not have even imagined it on that road trip when we were making our way down here. Could not have ever imagined where we are now, that we would have these 6 campuses, that we would have thousands and thousands of people here. And it's not anything that we did out of our own spite, but it's the Lord and His faithfulness and goodness. And so what it's like now is I'm like, I know how to dream now because the best days are ahead. The best is yet to come. And I will not limit God, because in that moment, I just remember feeling so limited. But He's shown Himself so faithful. So now I just am so expectant, and I can't wait for my grandchildren to be a part of this church and to dream for them and hear them pitter-patter through these hallways. So that's what it's like now. It's like, wow, look what God can do, because He's going to do even more.
You're so right. You're so right. Well, I want to peel back the layers of like Kacey 20 years ago, Kacey. Because I think that there's so many girls that are watching that are in a season of thinking that God doesn't have more for them. Or that God doesn't have His best for them, so they're choosing to settle. I feel like we all have had seasons in our life where we settled, but I also feel like we all have friends that are settling, and we keep reminding them, like, don't stay with this guy that you're dating right now. Don't keep tearing your body down. Like, God has more for you, but because He hasn't come through yet in our timetable, we're making choices and putting up with things that we shouldn't because we don't think there's better. And so I want to talk to the Kacey Stokes before the Kacey Stokes that's a pastor that we all know today. And I want you to share your story. I want you to share, like, when you first walked into church, what you were battling, who you were, and how God rebuilt you. Because I believe by the Spirit of God, people are going to hear your story, and it's going to give them hope that their lives can be rebuilt. And obviously, no life is perfect. But when you look at your before and your after, I think it's pretty remarkable. It's almost unbelievable. And so I think I need the girls to know, like, who you were over 20 years ago and what God has done. Because I feel like you're one of the women that we would read about in the Bible. And there'd be a book written about you. The book of Kacey. So because now you're just this, like, warrior. Like, you're such a warrior. You're such a boss. You oversee so many things while also loving your husband, raising your kids, and your capacity is endless. But I want them to know the Kacey from before so that they can see that also that there can be hope for them.
So good. Well, thank you so much. Well, I will start with when I was 19, my friend invited me to church, Shoreline in Austin, which is your church that you came from. And I went to church there, and she invited me on a 4th of July service. And they were talking about freedom and how Christ set you free. And I just remember when she invited me, I was like, sure, I'll do God a favor and go to church. I didn't believe in God. I didn't even know what to believe in. I was like, do I believe in the stars? Do I believe in the rocks? Do I believe in the moon? I don't know, because I did not grow up in church, and I was very promiscuous. I had a lot of boyfriends, did a lot of, not good choices, did some drugs, drank some alcohol, those things. But when I got to church that one Sunday, they were talking about how Christ set you free, and that, your way to heaven is through Jesus. And so when they said, do you want to give your life to Jesus? I was just weeping. I was like, wow, my life was about to go this way, and God, you found me and rescued me. So I shot my hand up, gave my heart to Jesus, and I was like, wow, this is amazing and incredible. Something incredible happened. But I remember still having all the friends that partied, all their friends, all the guys, all their numbers, all the things. And so I
let me ask you this, were you like bold? Would you like meet someone and like meet a guy and say, can I have your phone number? Or would you wait for them to approach you? Like how like
you had the
how thirsty were you?
Okay, so I was really thirsty. I mean, I thought growing up that sex equaled love, and that physicalness is how you get a guy. So I was very confident and very forward, and I'd be like, let me get your number. Can we get together tonight?
Got it. Okay. And
I was like, let me show you.
Look at her now in the cardigan. Now she's all demure.
Look at demure.
I
but
love
yes,
it.
I would be very forward. I would be like, well, the guys like when you are bold, very bold and you go after them. So I just kind of was that way. And so it was not good. It was not pretty.
What would you say to the girl? And I want you to continue on with your story. But I do feel like the world tells us, sleep around, go from guy to guy. It doesn't matter. It's your body. You do what you want with your body, and believe this lie. Like, why did you change and turn, and how did that bless you? Because I feel like there's some girls that are stuck in a cycle of finding their identity in their body and in sex, basically.
Yeah,
but
good.
like, what would you say to that girl? I want you to look at the camera right now, because we all have friends who don't know their value, they don't know their worth, and they're going from guy to guy because it's all they know.
Yes, so
but
good.
I just want you to just minister to that girl right now, because we love her.
Yeah, I would say this is definitely the cry of my heart, because you will go to guy, you will, do things that you know you shouldn't do. But what it is that you're trying to fill a void in your heart. You're trying to feel some type of love, some type of satisfaction, some type of, what's that word where, validation.
Yes.
You're trying to fill that void of validation, satisfaction, all those things, but it will never be satisfied. It will never be satisfied through those trivial relationships, through sex, through all of those things. And so for me, I had thought that sex was love. So I was constantly feeding this desire for love, and it was just always would fall flat. It would never fill the purpose. And so when I met Jesus, when I literally gave my heart to Jesus, I was like, I don't want any more guys. I don't want any more guys, because I have tasted and seen that the world is not good. And it actually really broke me. I remember going to, and this is super personal, but I remember going to a doctor and they were like, we have some good news and some bad news. And the good news is that we need to prescribe a medication for some things that happened to you that shouldn't have. The good news is that it's not permanent.
Wow.
And so that was just so life-changing for me. And I was like, I don't want any part of this anymore.
Wow.
And so I just decided to turn from that moment. And I was like, God, I don't want guys anymore, because obviously it's leading down a destructive path. And they said, one day you could end up with something really bad that could take your life. And so I was like, never again. And so then I really started to lean into my room. I will tell you this, when you're like, I'm ready to put this down, I'm ready to leave that behind, I would get on my knees every single night with worship music on in a home of non-believers with my door closed. And I would worship out to God and pray and say, God, you're my Father. I want you to heal my heart. I want you to fulfill my life. I want you to fill this void. You are love. And I would literally picture myself laying up against Jesus and him just holding me as I would cry every single night. There was not a night that would go by that I wouldn't do this, because I was just so desperate. I was like, I wasn't getting love over here anymore.
Right.
I need to get it from the source of what I just found. And it was literally a fountain that never ran dry, and it would fulfill me night after night after night. So what was so dark and destructive had actually was healed and made whole through Jesus. And it wasn't like this worship night or anything like that. It was just literally being intimate with the Lord in my bedroom. And so I would say that if you are struggling with that, if this is something that you're looking for, get alone with the Lord, because he's the only one that can truly satisfy your heart. He's the only one that can heal those places and satisfy the love that you're desiring. And that forever changed me when I said no more to that, because it was destructive, and I said yes to Jesus in that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like just that alone is going to set so many people free.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and honest, because you always hear about guys and their sexuality and guys and all the struggles that they have, but girls don't talk about this enough.
Yeah.
So I think this is so important. And I think it's going to take something that feels like it's been in the dark, bring it out into the light, so that the healing power of God can renew us and strengthen us.
Good.
And so jumping back into, you walked into church. Church was about freedom. We're hearing your story.
Yeah.
And you shot your hand up and keep going.
And I'll say that even in that moment, it just felt so freeing. But the real part of this is that I still wanted to live with one foot in, one foot out, right?
That's
At
real, which a lot of people are there. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I still want to go to the parties, I still go to the clubs, but then let me go to church on Sunday.
Right.
And, eventually I just kept showing up to church, and eventually I started meeting people, and it was the community where they started holding me accountable and being like, where are you going tonight? Why don't you come hang out with us? And so I went on a retreat.
I remember that.
Yeah, I went on a singles retreat. Pastor Earl was the pastor. And I remember sharing with this girl. Actually, she's my girlfriend in Frisco. Her name is Marisa. Her kids go to this church.
Yes.
And I remember sharing with them, I'm going to go to this frat party this weekend. And she was like, girl, you have no business at a frat party. And she told me that, and it shook me. And I was like, what? She's like, all it is it can turn into what can feel like where they're just looking at your body and they want you for the things that you're trying to run from.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, okay. So I didn't go because someone said you'd have no business there. And literally it just changed me. For someone to look at me and say, you have more value than that. I
Right.
never went to a frat party. And then from that moment on, I kept going to connect groups and getting community and meeting
Wow.
people. And then when other people would invite me out to party, I was like, no, because I had another group of friends and community.
Which is
So
key.
yeah, all of that to say, I would say if you're struggling also is to get in community, get with a group of friends
Yes.
because they will, point you in the right direction.
Exactly.
So after that, I ended up serving at the church. I started going to the
Beautiful.
singles ministry and serving.
I want to say,
Yeah.
okay, keep going, but I want to say this too.
Yeah.
I feel like now, because that was, 20 years ago
20
at
years ago.
least. I feel like now if someone said you shouldn't go to that frat party, because we're so just like twisted up in our thinking,
Yeah.
someone would go like, oh, you're just trying to control me.
Yeah.
You don't want to live my life. You don't want me to be my best. When really, that was the best thing for you.
It was.
Because you were at such a sensitive time
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have been able to be strong at that frat party
Right.
and you would have jumped back into your own patterns.
Exactly.
And so thank God for a friend who spoke up.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes with friends we don't speak up because we don't want to seem judgmental.
That's right.
But she wasn't being judgmental. She
Right.
actually had your best interest in mind.
That's right. And I would say too, for me, I think in that moment, I had a choice to make and I
Right.
had to like really decide like, do I want to go this route or
Right.
this route?
Right.
And so I think too, if you're on the edge, really think about which route you're going to take and which, what your end goal is and what's
Yeah.
going to happen in your life. But that's so good. And so I ended up serving at the church and there was a guy named Ben and he
Hey, shout out Ben.
shout out Ben. He kept inviting me to serve on his team and I was not interested
That's
at
a
all.
great pickup line.
I know. He's like, hey, can you help sort the papers at the table? It was like a connect center.
Yes,
And I
yes.
was like, sure, great, no problem. And I was not interested at all. And so we would go out and hang out on all these little dates and all these
Yes.
things, but I didn't know they were dates. And eventually we had went to lunch together
Okay.
and I was like, I want to hear your story. I want to get to know more of you.
Yes.
And he told me his whole life story, which was that he, also did not, live a life for Jesus.
Right.
He was just had this life story and how he came to church to Shoreline that year, the same year that I did earlier. And he gave his heart to Jesus and the things that he couldn't stop doing, which was like getting high
Right.
because he was in community, those things fell off of him. And so he shared that with me and I was just blown away by
Wow.
what God had did in his life. And so then I was like, okay, I really like you. You're kind of cool. And so we just started hanging out and he went on a mission trip to India and then it like radically changed him for the Lord again. And then he invited me to go. And I remember my parents, like I said at the time, they were just not involved in church.
Right.
And I was telling them, I'm going to go on this mission trip to India.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. My dad's like, slammed the door and he's like, you're not going and I'm not giving you any money. And in that moment, I just felt so defeated because I was still a new Christian.
Right.
And it was the first time I ever heard the Lord speak to me ever. And he said, stop crying. I'm your father. And I was just blown. Oh, I
me
literally
chills.
fell on the floor. I was so shook. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to cry. You're my father. And I was the first person to raise all of my money
Wow.
for the trip. And he just showed through and through and through. And I was like, this is so real.
Wow.
And so I got to go to India on the mission trip with Ben. And while we were there, we were dating and we knew we were called to be
Yeah.
married and
Yes.
do missions. And so we did that, and we ended up leaving Shoreline, Austin,
Yes,
and
I
going
remember
to
that.
another church
Yep.
and getting married and
Yes, all the things.
pregnant on our honeymoon and all the things. And then, fast forward, he put me through nursing school. I put him through Bible school. And then after that, we were just in Kyle, Texas, and he was serving as a youth leader at a church. And we were praying and fasting like, God, what do you want us to do? Right now we're in January Strong,
Right.
which is our time of prayer and fasting. And so we were doing the same thing, but with an online church at the time. And we prayed and fasted like, God, what do you want us to do next? And so he would put out his resume and he got hits in like Canada
Right.
and Wisconsin and Michigan. I was like, we will freeze to death. I don't like being cold. So, God did not answer us in that month. And so I was kind of frustrated. I was
Yeah.
like, I want to get out of Kyle, Texas. God, where do you want us to go?
Yes.
Our kids were 3 and 5 years old. And so that year in May, so a couple months later, Pastor Earl actually posted on Facebook, this is in 2011.
So wild.
He said, we're moving to Dallas to plant a church, and my heart jumped. So when they say that the baby in Elizabeth's tummy
Yes,
jumped, it
yes.
felt like that. I was like, whoa. And I'll never forget, I was laying on my bed and I posted on there on Facebook, I said, we'll move with you and Ben will be your youth pastor. But I didn't tell Ben.
I remember.
I know. 'cause He's not from Dallas. I mean,
Right.
he's from Dallas, sorry.
Yes.
And he never wanted to come back.
Right.
And this is where he had his hard life. And so I felt convicted. And I was like, hey, look what I told Pastor Earl. And he's like, no. We're not moving to Dallas. You remember
I
that?
remember Earl reading it to me,
Yeah.
going, Kacey just
Wow.
offered you an eyelash right
Oh,
here,
yeah.
but it's fine. We're
Sisters.
family, sisters. Yes. I remember Earl saying, "Look at this
Really?
Facebook post from Kacey. She's offering Ben to be the youth pastor."
That's so funny.
I know.
And so I showed him, and he was like, "No, we're not doing that." Well, the next day, Pastor Earl called him and was like, "Hey, I want to meet with you and your wife." And on the phone, he was going, and I was like, yes. And so he agreed, and we met with you guys in North Austin. You remember?
Yes. Yeah,
at
at
a
Starbucks. Yeah.
Yep. And I remember I was so excited. We sat across from you guys, and you were just, getting to know us in the season that we were in again. And you were like, tell us all the things. And then he sat down with us too and was like, hey, I don't know that I can offer you anything. I don't know that I can promise you anything.
Yeah, I remember.
But I do know that we want to be a church the world has never seen. And I know that we want to change the world. We won't need a youth pastor, but we would love for you to come, and we're just going to build this thing and see what happens.
Yep.
And, it was like when Ben had come to the coffee, he was a no. But when we were sitting there with you guys, he was an immediate yes. And Pastor Earl said, you guys go home and pray about it. Let us know. We looked at each other and we just knew. We were like, we're done. We're done. We're going. We're going to do this. This is what God's called us to. And I would say, too, is that we live in this motto, and we decided early on in our marriage that we never wanted to live outside of the will of God.
Wow.
And so we were very cautious and careful not to make steps or just on a whim be like, we think we're supposed to be called to do this. Like, we weren't going to do that. We weren't going to do it for money.
Yep.
Because money's not going to last. It's never promising.
Right.
We only wanted to walk in the will of God. And because that was the safest place for us, for our marriage, for our kids and our family.
Yes.
And so when you guys had spoke the vision in the heart of the church, we were like, this is God's will. Like, he just made it sure and secure in our hearts. And so then we just went back home and we told our church, we were like, hey, this is what God's called us to. We're going to be moving. We sold everything just as you guys did. Yeah. And, we had Camuel,
it was
our
like
son.
Book of Acts.
It was a Book of Acts. We had him enrolled in a kindergarten, and we pulled him out. And we just drove up to Dallas, and Ben got me a job at a hospital. His grandfather was sick in the hospital, and God opened the door for me to have a job. And then we moved in with his grandmother, all four of us in one bedroom of her house. But we were so excited to be there. And every day Ben would go out and meet with you guys at the bookstore.
Exactly. Yes, because we had no offices. And the bookstore was our office, and we'd sit at tables and dream about what church could be and invite every single person we met.
Yep, that's right. And we were just all winging it. We didn't know what we were doing, I think, in that stage, but we didn't advertise. We just word of mouth invited people and trusted God. And I will say this, our families thought, like, what are y'all doing? You're going up there.
Right.
And
they did
you're not going to have
sounded
a job.
crazy.
Yeah, you're not going to be working, Kacey, you're going to be supporting the family. Like, what's happening? And we were just like, no, we know that this is God's will for our lives.
Right.
Like, we trust our leaders and our pastors. And so it was, the best decision, but at the time it seemed crazy, right?
Right. And I think on the other side of crazy is the miraculous.
Exactly.
Because it was crazy that a girl in her 20s left, a stunning girl in her 20s, left a life of partying, left the bar scene. Because in today's world, when you're in your 20s, you're supposed to be at frat parties. You're supposed to be, dating around and all the things, like by today's standards.
Yeah.
So I feel like the Lord prepares you to do the crazy even back then, before you guys said yes to Shoreline City. But thank God that you stayed planted in church. Yeah. Thank God for a friend who spoke up and said that life is not going to be a life that returns a harvest to you, because now you get to minister to and encourage so many Caseys who are stuck in making bad decisions or stuck in shame or stuck thinking that there's not something on the other side for them. Yes. And you get to pull them along and say, I was you. God has more for you. And I just think about the power of staying planted in a healthy church and the fruit that remains because of it. I mean, I think about your kids, and like, I feel like I really am burdened on my heart for the girl who's stuck in a cycle of sin, or stuck in a cycle of not knowing her value and her worth, and not knowing the harvest that God has waiting for her. And so would you speak to like watching your kids now grow up in church and who your kids are becoming, because they wouldn't have that story had you kept that same lifestyle? Would you just talk about like staying the journey and remaining, and what that's meant for you, even watching your kids grow up? Because right now, the girls that's listening, she's 22. She's like, she's not thinking about being a mom one day. She's like in tomorrow. Right. But 10 years flies by so fast. 15 years flies by so fast. So I'm just praying that something you say, even in this moment, will remind her that I just feel like there's so many girls that are dating people right now that they should not be dating and are playing with fire.
So good,
And I'm just praying that this conversation does not bring shame, but brings freedom. And so what's it like for you now, all these years later, getting to minister to, encourage, be a big sister to other girls, but then also raise your kids and watch who your kids have become because you made the hard choice?
Yeah, I think what it's like now is it is just, there's so much freedom in my life, and there's so much joy in my life, so much comfort, so much peace. It has been hard, obviously. The journey is hard, but I would say that you get to control the outcome of the decisions that you don't get to control the outcome, but you get to control the decisions that you make.
Right.
And so I would say, that sometimes I think the biggest thing about this church that I love the most, that'll take me there, is that, pastoral has, and you have also been like, we don't wear a cloak of shame.
Right.
And so my biggest fear is that, my kids would walk around with a cloak of shame. And so just reminding them, you don't have to wear a mask, take it off.
Right.
And so I feel like back then, I learned that early on running with you guys, when I was in my 20s, of like, coming and sharing the things that were hard, and like, and you praying and being honest and things like that, that had helped me to walk out this journey. So, but I would say to the 22-year-old, I think that if you're struggling with sin and you're struggling from those things, of like, how can you turn from that? It's saying like, God, I want to live in your will and not my own.
That's so good.
Because if you and I think also living in God's will, number one is praying and asking him to reveal it to you, but also asking the leaders in your life, and really listening, because sometimes you can have this desire in your heart to maybe, go to the left, but God really wants you to go to the right. And if you ask a leader and they're like, I think you should go to the right, you have to be prepared to lay that down and say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. And even if it's the wrong decision, I know that you're going to guide me back to where I need to go.
Right.
So I think that you are going to make mistakes. No one is perfect.
No one.
And you are going to fail, at times as a wife and as a mom, which I've learned from you. It's like no one is perfect.
No.
And we can say, I'm sorry.
Right.
But all of that to say, I think just in your 20s, and if you're making decisions that are not Christ-like, that get yourself surrounded in community, listen to the Lord, get alone with him, and just keep walking out into the right decisions. Does that make sense?
Yes,
as much
it
as you
definitely
can.
makes sense. Yes.
But know that you can't fail. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. What would you say to yourself, the 20-year-old you 20 years ago, now that you're on the other side of what it means to follow God? I think about Lot's wife. There was a woman in the Bible, Lot's wife, and she looked back, and then she just was consumed by fire and perished. But you did not look back. You looked ahead, and God had this beautiful, stunning life ahead for you. What would you say to the 20-year-old you about what God had in store for her now that you're 20 years in?
Yeah, wow. I would say that no eye has seen and no ear has heard. Like, I couldn't have even pictured my life right now. Even when I think about when I sit across from you right now, I think, wow, when I was 20 years old, when I met you, that I would have never even imagined that I would be sitting in rooms with you, building the church with you. Never even imagined. And so what I would say to myself back then is keep going, stay the course, don't give up, stay planted in church. I think that's the biggest thing, is you have to stay planted in church, because we've seen over the last, 15 years, people that don't stay planted and when they fall off, and it is devastating.
So sad.
And they don't even realize that it's happening, and you try as much as you can to keep them on. But I think I've learned from you keeping us planted in church and staying the course, even when it's hard. And so even when you're tired, even when you don't want to go. And for my kids as well, I remember our son, he would, have a late night and he'd be like, I'm so tired, I don't want to go to church. And we're like, well, we got 11:30 service, so we'll see you there.
Yes.
Like, it's just not an option.
And now he's like leading.
Now he's doing awesome.
And your daughter is leading a Bible study, pouring into the next generation and passionate about it. But both of your kids are passionate about God's house, because you and your husband are passionate about God's house.
And we have this motto, which you say too in your house, I know, is that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so it just never is an option.
I love
and
it.
so when it's hard, we don't feel sorry for them. You've taught me this. We don't feel sorry for our kids if they're here all day. They used to be here for 4 services.
I remember.
We would bring their breakfast, bring their lunch, and they would run the halls. And so look, now they don't.
And now they run the halls.
Yeah,
they run the halls.
Yeah, now they run the halls. Now they're on teams. And
exactly.
they love the church. Our boys are both in college
They're
and they
best
want to
friends.
come
Yeah.
back here to go to church and to be a part of this house, which is miraculous. But that I feel like that only happened because, we learned from you of like making it just the priority. Like this is the priority above all else. So as some people want to go and do all the baseball and all the football and all the cheerleading and things, which I think are great.
Yeah.
We just were like, no, this is where we need to be
Priority,
for our future.
prioritize,
Our priority.
yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. I love talking to you.
Aw.
You're so amazing. You're so strong, brilliant, beautiful, anointed, graceful.
Love you.
I send so many people to you, and I love all the girls that you mentor. You mentor 20-year-olds, you mentor moms, you mentor single girls, you mentor families and couples. I was just telling you guys when we took you guys, we had like a little late birthday lunch for your husband. And we were talking about, even in our recent 10-year church celebration, so many people that we interviewed talked about how you and Ben and Jesus have changed their life. And so I'm so thankful that you ran from the old ways, ran to Jesus, because there's thousands of people that are on the other side of y'all's faithfulness. You're one of the most uncomplicated people I know. You're so easy to run with. You're so fun. You're so yourself. Sometimes you say crazy random things, but I love it about you. I love it. You still have this childlike innocence about you. You have not let, sometimes when you've been doing something for a long time, you get familiar. And I feel like you still carry people's lives and building God's church in your family. You carry it with such childlike nature and a tenderness, and I admire that about you. And I just wanted the girls to hear and to learn from you, because they see you, especially the Shoreline City girls, they see you as just like this boss, mom, wife, and pastor. But I also needed them to know that there was a girl 20 years ago who didn't know her value, who didn't know her worth, but who made a decision, come hell or high water, I'm staying planted in God's house. I'm going to, have the tough conversations. I'm going to be pruned. And now there's a stunning garden. And it is just great to get to learn from your garden.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And I think if you're wanting to think a picture that I think of my life, it would be the story of Ruth. And I think just staying faithful through the hard times when her husband, died, and then she had to follow her mother-in-law. And then she stayed planted serving. She was serving when her husband found her. I think that is like one of the most incredible stories to me. And then she gets to like be promoted and all the things. And so anyway, thank you so much for trusting me. Thank you for loving me and my family.
So we love you so
we
much.
are so excited for the many, many, many years ahead
More
and all
years
that
ahead.
God is going to do.
Yes.
But you're one of the best pastors, one of the best
Love
friends,
you.
one of the best leaders. I love momming with you and
So
learning
fun.
from you. And so thank you for doing this podcast. Love you so much.
I love you. I want to read a scripture over the girls as we prepare to close. You're the best.
Yes, you are.
XOXO. Love you forever. Girls, as we prepare to wrap, and I'm praying that this conversation strengthened you and encouraged you. And I want you to send this to all the girlies who are in that season of settling, in that season of not knowing their value and worth. And as we're preparing and just preparing our hearts for this conversation, I was thinking about Genesis, and I want to read a scripture, and we'll have the scripture for you on the screen. But it's the story of Jacob and Esau, and it's Genesis 25, verses 29 through 34. And it says, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. Jacob replied, first sell me your birthright. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is this birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. And I end with that story because I feel like many of us are giving up our birthright and giving up our identity for the short term. And it's so important that we look like how we talked with Kacey today, looking at her story. There came a time where she decided, I'm not going to sell my birthright. I'm going to go for the inheritance that God has for me. And we just want you to know, girls, that God has a holy inheritance for you. And so I just feel like some of you today, you just need to break up with him.
Yeah.
You're not being treated like royal. You're royal. You're not being treated royal. And you're settling for a stew.
Yep.
And God has so much more.
That's right.
And so we're praying that the Bible says old things are passed away, that all things will become new. And we're praying that as you step in fully into 2025, that you leave old thought patterns behind, old lies behind, and you accept the promises that God has for you. We speak peace over you. Favor over you, strength over you, and a holy blessing. We love you so much and so enjoyed this time together.
Love y'all.